Thank you.
All right, welcome back to our Nikon Theater stage. Roy, you want to check the program that's loaded up is not that program, unless there's something back here. Oh, it's different up there. So don't go by the notes on the vanity screen here. Or the,
Okay.
all right, so we are back live. How's everybody doing? If you're tuning in on Nikon Live or our Facebook page or YouTube channel, welcome back. We are having so much fun today, and we are rolling along with the next program. So we just did a segment with you and Jerry on shooting with the 85mm Z lens, the 1.8 lens. Now you're going to talk to us a little bit about your career. So, ladies and gentlemen, not wasting any more time, Nikon ambassador, best friend of mine, my Pookums, Joe McNally.
All right, how's everybody doing? You okay? Thanks for hanging in there. Yeah, we're just kind of tumbling forward here on stage. I have to say that, the legacy for me of working with Jerry on a job like that, it just once again proves to me the essence of this photo community that we all embrace. We're a very giving community. We respect each other. We trade information. We offer tips and help, etc. It's very much a back and forth. And that's what I've always loved about being a photographer. I enjoy the company of other photographers because we share the same challenges, same difficulties, same successes, occasional triumphs, repeated failures, all those things that are just a continuous kind of litany that we create with a camera in our hands. So for me to come to this point in my career and have Nikon say, well, pair up with Jerry Gionis and basically have some fun, I mean, that's like an unexpected reward of having done this for as long as I've done it, right? I gave myself, or felt I earned, the title of professional photographer in 1978. So you guys do the math, okay? So, portraiture beyond the lighting. Okay, so they kind of, stemming from that job, or kind of a continuation thereof, or linkage to the idea of doing portraits. I've always been in love with the human face. I just have. I find myself staring at people. I look out here at this audience, and there's some wonderful faces in this audience that I'd love to kind of craft a portrait of, right? What are you doing when you're shooting a portrait? It's not just the mechanics, the f-stops, the lighting, etc. What you're looking for is some glimmer, of, truth, an honest portrayal, something that's indicative of a life, a time, an endeavor, an occupation, all those kinds of things. And it's actually, I think, a little bit more difficult now as a photographer with digital and the facility of digital. I grew up shooting for Life magazine. I started shooting for Life in 1984. I'm the last photographer in the history of Life magazine. And one of my mentors there, John Loengard, the DOP, I photographed him after we were, he needed a new headshot, basically. And so John was like, could you do this for me? And then I talked him into an interview. So we sat and we talked for a while. And his theory, and it was a very provocative, interesting theory, because that's the way John thinks. He said, well, I think, digital has made this too easy on our subjects. And I was like, what do you mean? And we hark back to the days of film when you would belabor, right? You didn't know that you had it. So you'd shoot a roll, and another roll, and another roll. And sometimes you would get your subject to a point where they would just give up in a marvelous way and sort of, almost like give you this gift of a photograph because an element of fatigue or repetition or longevity behind the camera in terms of sticking with it. And he said, now, with digital, people are like, we're done, right? Can I see? Oh, that looks nice. 10 frames in, and it might look nice, but is it where you really want it to go? So we face that kind of challenge now because everybody's, what's the first question somebody asks you when you call them up to do a portrait session? How long is this going to take? Time, right? So, all right. First and foremost, a good portrait is about the relationship a photographer builds with his or her subject. And I was just indicating that in the talk with Jerry. when he was photographing me, I felt cared for, right? I felt like there was energy behind there was excellence behind the camera, and I could surrender to that, literally. And it is a bit of a seduction, right? Because you just kind of like, all right, I'm going to go with the flow here. I'm not going to fight it. I'm going to let this person, whoever it is, do their job, you know? So I'm coming back here I'm kind of coming a little bit full circle because I just did a documentary on global warming, and Nikon generously helped fund that project. And I'll just show you kind of the relationship that, you know, stems from having made a picture. This is George DeVokie. George is an ornithologist by trade, and for 45 years, he has lived on this deserted stretch of island called Cooper Island. It's a barrier island north of Alaska, studying a colony of black guillemot birds. This was the cover of the New York Times Sunday magazine in 2001. And when I shot this picture of George, we spent 9 days out there on the ice, living in pup tents, okay? And you kind of get to know somebody when you're eating Dinty Moore out of a can over a Coleman stove. You kind of figure out real quick if you're going to like each other, right? And George and I bonded. So I made this picture. I had no idea it would be the cover of the magazine. I was just thinking like, well, there's George with his bird scope, nice Arctic sky, made the picture, okay? I didn't know that George and I would remain friends for the last 18, 19 years. And so in 2019, I went back to Cooper Island, which is not an easy place to get to, and I made this picture. That's in he's upgraded from a pup tent to a small shack out on Cooper. And what he does every year, he goes out there for 3 months, and he lives there and he studies this colony of birds. But what has inadvertently happened is that George has become the creator of, the possessor of, the largest experiential record of global warming potentially on the planet. 45 years of note-taking, watching this island change. So he studies, he makes notes. This is window light. He goes out into the bird colony, he checks the growth, he looks at the chicks, the eggs that are hatching. What he's doing here is holding it to his skin in the cold weather. He's seeing if the egg is viable. And that's what we were after, okay? This is the original picture of 2001. Ice forever. 2019, water forever, right? The ice has receded 400 miles from the shores of Cooper Island. And that's what we were going after. I always said to George, you know, I really want to come up again. And he goes, Joe, if you come up again and you stand me in the same place I was, I'll be up to my knees, maybe even my hips in water. So this is the Beaufort Sea, current Beaufort Sea. The legacy of the ice is gone. And that's what we were after, to kind of tell that story. And that's the relationship you develop from the simple click of a camera, right? Someone in front of you, you have no idea. It doesn't happen all the time. I photographed a lot of people I don't stay in touch with, right? You know, some people at the end of the session, you'd prefer not to stay in touch with. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying, right? You're done here. Okay, here's your picture. Thank you very much. We're done here, okay? You know, but George and I were the reverse of that, the flip side of that. We developed a relationship that became a story, and the evolution of the technology is still a portrait of George, but in this instance, in 2019, I went up with a 5-person video crew, as opposed to the first time I went there with a camera bag on my shoulder. All right, you meet people, right? Les, okay? He's out on the streets of New York, Les Goodson. Here's the thing, you have to go with your gut as a photographer, right? I walked past Les, he was playing his sax, and I thought, well, that sounds good. So I put a little money in his case, kind of hung out, and then he saw the camera on my shoulder, and he said, you know, it can be very annoying when people take your picture, and then they don't give you any money, you know, and it's like, there was this back and forth, and I was like, and he had different classifications of photography. He goes, there's the documentary type. He goes, they come up to you and they're like this, and then they're this, and then they're this. And he goes, that gets really annoying, you know. But we had a good conversation, and I walked down the block. And then I thought to myself, that was stupid. So I went back and I sat down on the sidewalk with him, and I spent the next hour, 2 hours, and the thing that became apparent to me is he plays Take 5, the jazz classic, all day long. Okay? He doesn't play anything else. Why? Because he catches people's attention, right? Even somebody who doesn't know jazz knows Take 5. And they're like, and he goes, I'm just maximizing my marketing. You know, I play this. People come up, he said to me, people come up to me and say, man, you play really well. And he goes, I should be able to play well. I play the same damn song here for 5 hours every day, you know? And so we built a relationship. And the next thing you know, I'm with him, and I want to see what his life is like. This is his apartment. He lives uptown in Harlem, okay? This is at a club he gigs at every Wednesday night. He's at the Paris Blues Club up in Harlem, okay? This is a lit portrait. What you do with portrait work is you go with the flow, right? The beautiful natural light, let's go for it. If I need to light it, let's do that. Okay, versatility is a huge, huge element of being a photographer. This is the Paris Blues Club. These are light. This is a lit portrait. All my lights are outside. It looks like early morning, right? Little smoke machine inside. All my lights are on the sidewalk. Why? I'm creating a feel. I'm doing a portrait here, so I have the leeway to just kind of deviate from reality and create a feel or a window into this man's life. Okay? Sometimes a portrait session is a result of a long relationship and mutual respect. Okay? All right. Okay, Mary Carr. Does anybody know the book The Liars Club? Very famous book. I made this picture of Mary years ago, and she always told me it was her favorite picture. And then she needed a new picture for a book of poetry, so about 20 years later I made that. So it's a relationship that you build. As a photographer, you have to realize there's an emotional connection you're trying to make with your subject. And that oftentimes is not easy, but when you do connect, it can be very, very durable. Jerry Gionis, okay, in the pool. By the piano, you've seen these. So portraiture can be a celebration. Sometimes it can be a confrontation, right? That's my friend Donald, who has now passed away, right? But I wanted Donald to be, I don't know, part of the sky. So here's where you use technique. I made this picture at a very long, very sizable f-stop, which resulted in a flash mix and a very lengthy exposure. Like, I don't know, I'm looking at maybe a quarter of a second here, okay? And that's what creates the motion in his hair with the wild Santa Fe sky behind him and all the wind. I wanted Donald to be part of that. And sure enough, sadly, when he passed on, I wrote a blog, and I said in my blog, now Donald, you really are up in the sky. Mikhail Gorbachev. Anybody remember Gorby? I wanted to meet Gorbachev because I felt he was a very important piece of history. Okay, so I was in Moscow. I was working in Russia a great deal, and I shot this for Time magazine. You know, Time didn't really want the portrait, so they said, well, you can use the resources of the Bureau, but we're not going to pay you. And I said, well, that's nothing new, you know, you know. And Time magazine did publish this picture, okay? They published it, if you threw a little box right around his head, they published it on the contents page, the size of a postage stamp. Okay, so welcome to being a photographer. I had a fight to get this picture because he didn't want to come out to the woods with me. I wanted him in the woods because he's a very isolated figure in Russian history. And finally, it took 3 days, but his security relented, and they brought him to the woods, and he stood in the snow for me for about 10 frames, and then he said to me the only English word that he said to me during the entire thing. He looked at me, shook my hand, and said, goodbye. You know, this lady, she's a wonderful lady. She has a school named after her. Sadly, she has passed on, but I wanted her life to be celebrated. A public school teacher in the city of New York for 32 years. Lovely, amazing lady. Okay? Confrontation. This guy is in the martial arts Hall of Fame. I wanted something tough. I wanted something durable. I wanted him to look like a piece of granite, which was not hard to do given the physical condition that he's in. But this is not a moment for soft light. This isn't like baby portraiture where you have a nice cuddly soft light. This is hard and edgy and you want power to the light. So you match the environment and the light with your subject. This lady, this is Ellis Island, okay? She came as a baby, okay? I forget the exact date, maybe 1920-ish, somewhere's in there. She's getting close to 90, but she still has her baby picture from when she came through Ellis Island. And I have a long relationship with Ellis Island. So I brought Margaret out there. You want to tell a story, right? You just don't want to photograph her against an old wall, even though that would be pretty. What do you tell the story with? The totems, the physicality of what you're confronted with. Her card when she came through Ellis Island. Why did she come through Ellis Island? Freedom, okay? So again, lighting, because the exposure outside is blazing. But I couldn't get Margaret to come to a cold day on Ellis Island at sunrise when there's beautiful light. This is like high noon light. So I have to think my way into that and replace the light and even it out with my own flash. Okay, in Tanzania, okay, this is the effects of trachoma. It's a single speed light off to the left. Are you quietly, bit by bit, revealing someone's character or life, or is the photo meant to startle or arrest the viewer's eyes in sudden and dramatic fashion, okay? This will stop you, right? Does anybody remember the Napalm Girl? Kim Phuc, running down the road at the age of 9 in Vietnam, horribly burned, okay? This is her baby Thomas, 25 years later. I was assigned by Life magazine to go find the subjects of Pulitzer Prize-winning photographs. And Kim was an incredibly gracious lady, and we're friends to this day. And Thomas was this little beautiful dumpling of a baby that sprung from her body, her horribly scarred body, and all the turmoil and trauma she had suffered, and she gave birth to this child. That was the essence of that photograph. Leonard Bernstein, a photograph of genius, right? Leonard Bernstein at the piano. He lost himself so thoroughly in the music that he actually just was oblivious to the idea of me photographing him. Tony Bennett in a coffee shop. Why did I put him in this coffee shop? Because Tony grew up as a kid in Astoria, Queens. That's the Queensboro Bridge. That was his avenue to the dreams of Manhattan and the bright lights. Okay? And this, I don't know. I just don't know. I woke up one day and I said, I really want to photograph a crazy guy with 2 oxyacetylene torches in a garage. If you're in this business a long time, sometimes it's a way of saying thank you to do a portrait. Fred Demarest, my professor, he opened the door to a lifetime of photography. The other professors in the department didn't want me in the department because my grades weren't that good. Fred saw something. I don't know what it was. But he let me into the Syracuse University photojournalism program, and then he invited me to come with him to England, and I spent 2 more years studying with Fred and graduated with a master's degree in photojournalism. Fred is gone now. So before he left us in this world, I went and I photographed him. I visited him in hospice, and it was one of the more emotional times I've had, because when you intersect with a great teacher, that's an important moment in your life. It just absolutely is. And Fred was that for me. Never been on location, never met the model. Don't panic, it'll all work out. Project confidence. How many folks have been in a situation, camera in hand, and you feel completely over your head? Like you're gone. No idea what to do? Yeah, been there, right? Same thing here. I said to myself, I've said it many times throughout my career, I look around and say, what would a good photographer do right now? You know? Because you're trying to find your way, you know? So this fashion model, you know, I'm like, all right, I got to work this out. Very high-priced fashion model. Not a particularly patient person. We worked it out, okay? Speed lights, okay, off to the side. An Italian coffee shop in Milan. Out on the street, waiting for trains, okay? I've sat on more streets in more cities and more filthy sidewalks and gutters than I care to admit. Simple light, She was impossibly tall. She was wonderful, ultimately. But sometimes you just have to wing it, right? I never met her. She walked onto the set like, okay, what do we do now? Okay? Speed lights, scrim. Know the intent of the photograph. Look, let's face it, I've shown you some pictures I'm very connected to emotionally, but sometimes, what are we doing here? It's an act of commerce, right? You're trying to make a living, right? So, you got to know the intent and emphasize the intent. This is a beauty campaign for MAC Cosmetics. Shot it for MAC Middle East in Dubai last year, okay? And I knew what I was getting into, right? I mean, we're not in touch, right? You know, she's a vehicle for the cosmetics. My camera is a vehicle to get that message out. That's all, you know. I got paid for the day. I was happy to do it. Everybody was fine. I mean, this is not great art. Okay, let's just say that, okay? You know, I'm showing whatever it is, eyeliner, something, okay? Minimum depth of field. I try to contribute, even in a commercial sense, I try to contribute to the photograph. Minimizing depth of field is one way I can do it, kind of get a little dreamy in the background. And I picked up something. The art director and the team there brought, that's Christmas tinsel in the background. And I thought, well, son of a gun, you know? That's actually pretty smart. Cheap and effective out of focus background. So I got that tucked away, and I just used it again. But I can't show you those pictures. But, you know, I just did a set in LA about a month ago, and I ordered Christmas tinsel off of Amazon for $7.99 a sheet. It was like cheap and effective. I'm like, I'm there. Okay? Your approach has to match the subject at hand. Sometimes that demands simplicity. Okay? It's over there. It's a big picture, right? This is my friend Nancy. Nancy is an amazing, I mean, she might be she's certainly one of the most lovely people I've ever had in front of my camera. And she's real, you know. As a, you know, kind of politeness to her, you know, I said, Nancy, you know, I'm going to do these pictures of you. We've known each other a long time. If you want hair and makeup, I'll get you hair and makeup, you know, if that's... And a lot of people would say, yeah, by all means, you know, I mean, you know, I'd want some hair and makeup for sure, you know. But Nancy's like, nah, you know, it's okay, Joe. Just put me in front of the camera, do what you're going to do. And she is literally one of the most beautiful and real people. She and her husband, Rick, run an outfit called Horses for Heroes out in New Mexico. And Rick is former Special Forces, and they're both... She's a cowgirl, he's a cowboy, and they know horses, and so they bond troubled vets or disabled vets with a horse, and it's very effective on an emotional and healing level. Okay, out on the streets of New Orleans, that's the exterior of Preservation Hall. Okay, available light, early morning, subdued light. I was just lucky the guy showed up wearing purple. I was like, thank you, you know. Other times it can get more complex or humorous. Okay? This was part of a thing I did for the Atlantic magazine, this ultra fancy cocktail bar. And so I focused on the drinks, you know, and let it just ride, you know. What are you going to do? This guy runs an ice cream vending operation in Los Angeles that uses nitrogen and flash freezes the cream into ice cream right there kind of in front of you. I forget the exact process. But I saw the you know, nitrogen and stuff, and I was like, okay, you know, this is high noon in Los Angeles, right? But it doesn't look like that. It looks like we're in a damn studio, you know? But yeah, so you go for it, because I told him, I said, look, I want to make you like the Dr. Frankenstein of Los Angeles ice cream. I want you to be pouring this steam, and I want you to stop just short of screaming, "It's alive!" Okay? All right? And this lady was Miss Romania in 2017. I said, Reach for your reflection in the mirror like you love yourself. It wasn't a stretch for her, let's put it that way. Lens selection, f-stops. It's a bunch of numbers in your head that translate to a profound impact on the look and feel of the portrait. Okay, long lens, lavender fields in France. Okay, this is a 200 to 500 D850 shot. That's a wide angle at a big f-stop. Big difference, right? Right? Choice of lens really impacts what you're trying to say. What you see in the photograph says a lot. What you exclude says a lot. Okay? Minimum depth of field. So 3 pictures of the same young lady speaking differently. On the streets of London, out of focus background, little side light, this kind of like this dude, this fashion guy. Here's the setup out there on the street. I'm using speed lights into these last of light strip lights. I like strip lights. They're like taking a line of light and just drawing on your subject with it, and kind of this linear fashion. It can be a very vertical light. You can use it differently, but it's a very vertical light at its essence. And what is a human being? A human being is a very vertical object, right? Generally speaking. So you bracket that. It's a nothing background, right? It's just a street in London. But if you control, that's the thing. When you're applying light out there to the portrait, you become the master of the circumstance as opposed to the victim of the circumstance. You control the elements. So I'm able to take that street and just turn it into like a dreamscape in the background, right? Pretty light, pretty lady, out of focus background, good to go. Okay, same thing here with Shazmin up in Vancouver. It's the same basic lighting grid. A little bit of a main light, a little bit of a hair light, because why? I mean, she's got amazing hair, so let's do it, let's go for it. Okay, a soft light with a fill. Okay, let the color speak. Soft, voluptuous light. Okay, soft and rich because it embraces the color and the beautiful shape of her face. Side light, okay, this is a simple portrait, okay, very easy going. The beautiful thing about natural light and a window like this is that on a cloudy day, it doesn't change that much. So you can just hammer frames, right? You're moving fast and you get this done, and then you immediately will shift into another scenario. This is not simple window light, okay? This, again, came out of my imagination. Adorama Camera said, we'd like you to come back and teach for us. And I said, well, the last thing I want to do is stay in a studio and say, this is an umbrella, this is a softbox. If you let me do something out of my imagination, I'll teach for you. So I've photographed dance my whole career. So I said, how about a scenario like this? Somebody is murdering ballerinas in New York. Right? I've seen too many crime movies, right? And this is my friend Nick. He's a tough guy in the movies, right? He's in the John Wick series and stuff like that. So I said, Nick, I need you to come and be a detective. And so we found a dead ballerina in a dryer. And the obvious perpetrator, right, is a competitive ballerina who is, eliminating her potential, rivals, And so this is late night in New York. So I've got lights on the sidewalk. And they're actually not on the sidewalk. They're clamped to my Suburban, the luggage rack on my Suburban, because if you haven't got somebody out on the sidewalk watching your lights in Brooklyn, very quickly you will be shooting available light. Just saying, okay? Keep your eye on your subject. They'll do the most interesting things when you think they are not, or when they're not specifically posing. This lady is from the circus. Her portrait is right around the corner here. Very expressive. She's an aerialist with the Bucharest Circus. And I said, could you get on that marble column? And she said, of course. We go from flash and painted faces in Bucharest to the street light of the Bronx. Okay, this kid is a break dancer. meeting his grandfather out on the streets of the Bronx, you have to be prepared. You have to be able to roll with the punch and be spontaneous. You need to connect with your subject. Sometimes professional talent needs direction, but it's oftentimes advantageous to take professionals' talent and just let them do what they're going to do. This is Vegas, all right? And my friend Jolie, who I worked with yesterday, backstage. There's Jolie there. And then using a bit of camera technique to see if I could impart something a little bit different to the photograph. You see somebody's shape, so you outline that shape with light. How am I doing?
You're all right.
I'm all right?
You got another 2. Take another 2. You want him to keep going?
2 minutes, and we're done. Swear to God.
Joe, you have 2 minutes left.
Thank you. Good portraiture and good use and interpretation of light go hand in hand. There's Miss Romania again, and over and under light, bracketed with some beautiful kind of out of focus mansion sort of environment in the background. The window lit portrait I showed you before, where it's soft light, embracing her face, that's the same window. So work to scale. Work in close, step forward, step back, okay? Sense of scale, moving the camera, being active, being nimble mentally and physically at the camera. Very, very important, okay? I thought about the blue. I was like, should I do the blue? My assistant at the time said, Joe, the blue is so 80s. I'm like, all right. So I asked around on the set. The rest of them were like, no, we like the blue. I showed the model. She goes, I really like the blue. And I'm like, yeah, we're going to go with the blue. Again, window light, very simply done. You catch the window light over here with a silver reflector. I use these tri-grips. I bounce the light up at her. Pretty simply done. And there's the lady in the window again. And I shifted. This is the same scene as you saw before, but I shifted the white balance. So use the technology that you have in the camera, and you can come up with different looks. And good luck.
Oh, Joe McNally. You are my hero.
Thanks for hanging in there, folks.
Awesome.